I remember the guy in the wheelchair at church when I was growing up, and wondering, God, will you listen to his prayers if he can't stand and pray like the rest of us? I remember laying in my hospital bed, unsure if I'd lose my foot. And I cried out to God and asked, how do I pray? What do I even pray for? God, does it matter if I pray at all? I remember sitting on the back of the fire truck after we were evicted from our home, and I was convinced that my family would be better off if I died that day. I really don't want to talk tonight about our theme. Our theme is refined by fire. It's what happened to me. It is my story. It's a story that started here in Minot, North Dakota. The trouble with being refined is it involves pain, suffering, heartache, hurt, destruction. For me, as you watch my introduction, you can kind of see that I may like fishing just a little bit. And refinement, to me, what best describes it is when I'm sitting down with my boys and I'm pouring jigs. We got our jig mold and we got the lead, and we take this raw lead and we put it in the lead pot and we melt it. And all those impurities come to the top, and sometimes we get a fire in the basement and my wife gets upset, but I'm a firefighter, it's okay. And we scrape those impurities off, and we do that multiple times until we get to the point where the lead is to a point that we want to use it to make jigs. And then when we go and we fish too much and we ran out of jigs, we go and we take that lead and we put it in that lead pot and we pour jigs. And every once in a while we get, and a jig is half done, or there's a bubble in it or something, and we say, this one isn't perfect. And we take that jig and we put it back in that lead pot and we melt that lead off. And we put the hook back in the mold and we remold that jig. That's what we're talking about tonight. How does God mold us? The Bible tells us that He is the potter and that we're the clay, and if it's His prerogative, He can take us and He can start from scratch. That's refinement. It's a biblical principle. Every kid comes to that time in life when you have to go to college. And for me, my entire life I had planned out. I'm kind of a planning kind of guy. And I knew that I was going to go to NDSU and play football, and I was going to go into fisheries biology. It's simple. If you get paid to fish for a living, you have a good life. Anyone else agree with that? Amen. Yeah. And that was my goal. In my sophomore year in high school, I screwed up my knees in a football game, and I couldn't play football anymore. And so I was looking for a college to go to, and I sat down and I prayed, and I said, okay, God, I will do anything you want me to do. I'll go anywhere you want me to go. You got my attention. I'll shut up and just listen to you now. God, what do I do? And so I sat down and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. And I wrote down a list of the criteria for the college I was going to go to. And that list is the list that no parent wants their kid to write. Because the first thing on my list was it had to have wrestling. I couldn't play football, but the doctor said I could wrestle, so I had wrestling on there. The second thing on my list of attributes for the college that I wanted to go to is it had to be on a lake so I could fish. The third thing on that list is it had to be within 2 states in North Dakota so I could get home and hunt. How many parents here are really freaked that their kid's going to come up with a list like that? Okay. That was my list. There was nothing about academics. There was nothing about, biblical this or biblical that. And I ended up going to Northwestern Bible College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And after the first quarter that I was there, I picked up a video camera and fell in love with a career that I never ever dreamt of being part of. And for the last 20-some years, I've been working with ministries and groups around the world. But what went crazily wrong in college was the fact that my freshman year, things were good. My sophomore year, things were going really good until I came home for spring break to go fishing for a week. And I had a very traumatic experience in my life, and that was the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about a girl. And I don't know about you, if you remember back that first time when a really important thing in your life got ruined by a girl, and that's the only thing you could think of. Oh, it was bad. There's nothing worse than sitting alongside a lake and actually catching walleyes and having a grand old time and not caring about the fish because there's a girl back in Minneapolis. It's like, oh. And one thing led to another, like it is, and we ended up getting married, and we ended up moving to Georgia, starting our first job, and doing all that fun stuff. And in 2003, we got the opportunity to move back to North Dakota because it was important for us to raise our boys. We had Dan and Peter at the time, and Andrew was on the way. And we wanted to raise our boys in a place where I could teach them how to hunt, fish, hang out with people that taught them good morals, good values, a work ethic. And part of that was having the opportunity to show them what it means to have a duty to others, a duty to your community. And on April 8th, 2005, we woke up, me and the boys, And we watched fire trucks that day. It was going to be a hot, windy day. And at noon that day, the pager went off. 40-mile-an-hour winds, 85-degree temps. And the pager went off, and we had a fire 5 miles from home. And me and my buddy Mark hopped in the fire truck, and we went out. We had initial attack responsibility on that fire, and we fought that fire, and we stopped it. And then it lit up again, and we stopped it, and it lit up again, and it crossed the road. And for 5 hours, we fought that fire. And it got to a point where the fire was just too much for us to handle, and so we pulled off to the side of the road, and we filled up with water. We stripped all our gear off, cooled off, got some water in us to hydrate, and the decision was made to go back and fight that fire. And a third guy hopped on our fire engine. His name's James, and he hops on that fire engine, and he hopped on just like the typical North Dakota firefighter that wants to fight grass fires. He just had his coat on. It wasn't zipped up. He didn't have his hood on or any of that stuff. And I looked at him and I said, James, you got to zip up. You got to put your hood on. You got to put your helmet on. This fire's hot. It's nasty. We've been fighting it all day. And he zipped up. I zipped up. I threw an air tank on that structure firefighters use, but we just got them for our department. So I threw it on for practice because it was kind of smoky. And we go out and we're fighting this fire. And the flames are 3 to 4 feet high. And I'm on the fire truck, and James is right in front of me. He's spraying the flames in front. I'm spraying the flames in the back. Mark is in the fire truck driving. Everything is going well, and the fire truck stops. And I hear Mark's door open, and I turn to see Mark, and I hear him say, "Get out of the truck, get out of the truck." And I go and I tap James on the truck, and when I look back, I saw this. Flames 20 to 25 feet high, ripping across the prairie at hundreds of yards per second. And I knew I had to put my nozzle where it belonged so I could find it again because of the training I had, and I turned to put my nozzle down. And I remember in my head climbing off that fire truck. But what happened is my leg fell 18 inches and I broke my right leg. The reason I fell is my left boot got stuck in a hole in the fire truck that nobody had ever saw or thought about. And I cartwheeled off that truck and I hit head first and I laid unconscious next to that fire truck for almost a minute. You see, what happened is the initial wave of heat that came out of the hole below us was 25 to 3,500 degrees. And it killed the engine on the fire truck. One of the things that haunts me is Mark ran from that fire truck, and if I would have went left instead of right, I would have seen my buddy burst into flames. But I would have had a nozzle that I could have put him out with. If I would have went left and right, I wouldn't have fell. And I laid next to that fire truck until that pass alarm on that SCBA, that air tank that I had, woke me up. And I went to start crawling out of that fire because I knew I had to get out and I had to get to safety. And an 18-year-old senior in high school and a 55-year-old trucker from Wilton, North Dakota ran into that fire and pulled me out. And that started 33 days in the hospital. It took until September of that year for me to learn how to walk again. And they gave me permission to go back to work. And on the first day that I was allowed to go back to work, I went in for my therapy appointment, and there was a little red spot on my ankle. And I didn't think anything of it. I asked my therapist. By the time my therapy appointment was done, that red spot went from the size of a dime to the entire length of my incision. And they rushed me down to the doctor. They did x-rays. They put me on a bunch of antibiotics, and they said, if you start slurring your speech, If you start getting a fever, if you start not making sense to others, we want you in the ER immediately. And the next day I went to work and I didn't think anything of it, and I was just excited that I could work, and I drove home. And I walk into the house, and our pastor and his wife was with Kirsten at the time, and they were just talking about how exciting it was that I could be back to work and how things were progressing. And I remember vividly them saying, "How was work?" And I told them how great it was, and they got a concerned look on their face. And I kept talking, and the only thing I remember after that was the pastor looking at Kirsten and said, "We'll take care of the kids, you go." Because I wasn't making any sense. They could see that I was running a fever. I was slurring my speech. And that day I got to go in for surgery. And they cut all the new bone growth out. They cut all the plates and screws and everything out of my leg. And they put a PICC line in, and they started injecting 6 grams of antibiotics into my heart twice a day. One night I woke up and I knew something was wrong, and from my medical training and the different things that I've had from being a firefighter and a first responder, I knew that I was developing blood clots. And that was the first time I was afraid that I was going to die. In fact, I wasn't afraid I was going to die. I knew I was going to die. And before I woke up Kirsten, I rolled on the floor, and I crawled out of my bedroom, and I crawled into the boys' bedroom, and I laid a hand on my boys, and I prayed my last blessing that I knew I'd be able to give them. Because I knew I was going to go to the hospital that night, and I wasn't going to come home. And I got to spend a couple weeks in the hospital, and they saved me, so you guys are stuck with me tonight. And everything seemed to be going fine. It took me until February of the next year before they gave me the okay to be learning how to walk again and have the ability to go back to work. And my leg hurt. It hurt really bad. And I just put off going to the doctor for almost 5-6 months, and finally went to the doctor. He did x-rays, and they said, well, we have to do an MRI. They did an MRI and found out that my bone had started to die. And in January of 2007, I went into the hospital, and they cut out part of my tibia that had died, and they grafted new bone and fused my ankle. And I got to be in a wheelchair for another 3 to 4 months. And it was then that I remembered that question that was in our video here. That kid that was in a wheelchair all the time during church when I was growing up, and that question of, if we all got to stand up and fold our hands and do whatever we do to pray to God, is God listening to my prayer right now? Do you care what's going through my mind, God? What's happening to me right here, right now? And the answer is yes. God supplied to us in ways that was just miraculous. When I got burned, we thought that we were covered if I got hurt in an accident as a volunteer firefighter. I owned my own business, and if I got hurt, that was our income. And it turned out that wasn't the case. The insurance policy that covers firefighters provided $800 a month for me and my family of 3 to live on. And you had all sorts of well-intentioned people saying, well, you're going through a hard time, Geremy. You need to work on a budget so you don't get behind financially and all this other stuff. And it made me so mad. Because my budget, in my mind, was really simple. I have this much expense. I'm in a wheelchair and can't work. Budget done. But my wife and I would sit and pray. We'd pray with the kids. And my favorite Christmas was one Christmas we were trying to figure out how we were going to pay any bills. And we opened up a card in a family from a small town in North Dakota had a check in there, and in the card it said, our family decided to bless somebody this Christmas. Here's a check. And it was $100 more than one of the bills that we needed, and we're like, we know somebody on the other side of the country that's going through a similar issue. We took the money, we paid our bill, and we wrote a check. We went and got a gift card so this other family could buy Christmas presents. And then we prayed and we said, God, how are we going to cover the rest of the bills? And in the next week and a half, every bill that we needed for the next 2 months was covered. From people that we had never met. We had miracles like that in our life. I got the opportunity to start working again. And I got a job with an organization that allowed me to help firefighters not get hurt the way that I did. I could work from a wheelchair if I needed to, and things were going really well. And I actually got to work again and get a real paycheck. And I was so excited about that paycheck. This is awesome. I get to work, have fun, do all this stuff. And one of my proudest days is when I got to go to our landlord and let him know that I got a job. Here's all my back rent. And I asked him, I feel guilty. I know you know what I've been going through. I know you've been really supportive of us, but I feel guilty for everything that's happened. I hate not being able to pay my bills. Here's all my back rent. Is there anything that needs to change in this business relationship? And the landlord said, no, everything's fine. You're golden. We're just glad that you're better. Thanks for coming. Everything's good. And I went home, and for the first time in 3 years, I had pride in my life again. I was proud to be a man, a father, an employee, a functional part of society. And 2 days later, the landlord had a sheriff drop off our eviction notice, giving us 26 days to get out of our house. And I walked out of my house, I left my family, and I went and I sat on the fire truck that I got burned in, and I cried for hours. And I asked God, why? Tell me, God, why am I going through this? Why is this happening to me? What did I do? Wouldn't my family be better off if I died on April 8th, 2005 than what I'm putting them through now? And I'm here to tell you that's one of the best days of my life. Because that was the day that I got to start learning about the lies that Satan uses to get us down. Lie number one, Geremy, you need to forgive yourself for what happened. We live in a world where bad things happen. Anyone who tells you that if you live a good Christian life, you're going to have a good life, you're going to be pain-free, is lying to you. We live in a world of troubles. And what you got to do is you got to believe that Jesus forgave you. It doesn't matter if you can forgive yourself. You couldn't pull yourself out of that fire. You couldn't heal yourself. You need help with that. God is here to help you with everything. He sent His Son to die on the cross for us, to forgive you. There's that terrible verse in the Bible that says that faith comes through our struggles. And one of the things that we've learned raising our kids is so many times we do everything possible to protect our kids from any bad thing at all. And sometimes it's those struggles that they need to have the faith that they have. I got the opportunity to learn what contentment means. How many of us here have told somebody, you just got to be content? You can't have all these worldly items. You can't have this or that. And we always put all these criteria on what contentment means. But if I went through what I went through, I wouldn't have the opportunity to understand what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego learned. They're getting ready to get tossed in the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar says, so is your God going to save you or what? And they go, yes. But if he doesn't, that's his deal, not mine. Contentment. God, I know you're going to save me. You're going to get me out of any situation I'm in. But if you don't, I'm okay with that. Peace, that when all things go horribly wrong or phenomenally right, we're okay with that, God. Patience. God, you need to answer my prayer right now. No, he doesn't. He gets to answer them whenever he wants. Are you ready to find out why we get these opportunities? I got a picture to show you. It's not a good picture. It's a painful picture. It's a picture that defines refinement. Here it is. At 9 o'clock in the morning and at 9 o'clock at night, for 12 days, the nurses took wet Kerlix dressing and wrapped my foot and let it dry, and 12 hours later tear it off. Without that treatment, I would have got an infection and I would have lost my foot. And on day 7, a doctor walked into my hospital room at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and wanted to see my foot. And he told the nurses, take the bandages off right now. I need to look at that. And every nurse on that floor said no. I said no. And he said, no, I don't have time to come here at 9 o'clock tonight. I need to know what it looks like right now. And see, the trouble with that is they had me on a strict pain medication regimen, and they couldn't change it. And at 4 o'clock that afternoon, they tore my bandages off without any pain medication. And the nightmares that I have today are of that. That doctor that was too arrogant, too selfish, too impatient to care about me, that he put me through that kind of pain. Why did I deserve that, God? Was my question. The answer sucks. Because the answer is, if we take a look at this picture, that's what the doctor did to me. Refinement is realizing that's what I did to Jesus' entire body because of my arrogance, my sin. And what I deserve is death and nothing more. I did that to my Savior, to my King. And he took it because he loved me. And we're all here to be refined. We're all here to grow in faith. We're all here to be discipled. We're all here to learn. Sometimes we're the one that needs picking up. And after we've been picked up, we know what it takes to pick somebody else up. And that's what it means to be refined.